Hello and welcome to Americans Learn. Once again, I'm just gonna be back here on this set for a little while. So once we change it back, you'll know. I don't really want. I guess I have to keep explaining it because people find different videos all the time. Basically, Chicago Reacts is another one of our channels. I was having some issues with some of the audio on Learns for people who are listening to on their headphones. So this is just sort of to make sure that people on their headphones are not hearing really weird audio, because I think it was only coming out of one speaker from my microphone, but the videos were coming out from both. So we're just avoiding that issue by using a different background. It's fine. Today I am going to be looking at a geographics video. This one is the Ryugyong Hotel. It is North Korea's Hotel of Doom. I chose this one because it seems kind of spooky, and my goal right now is to find as many spooky, creepy, weird videos as I can across the channels so I can have spooky videos during October. So we've got some fun stuff happening. I'll be having like Castlevania is going up on Patreon. I'll have Helsing Unlimited going up on Chicago Reacts. Over the Garden Wall is happening on Chicanime. Basically, I'm just looking for spooky stuff. So if you've got creepy, spooky things that you think I should look at, go ahead and tell me. I want the spookiest things that I can find. So today we're looking at a Hotel of Doom. I mean, it's in North Korea, so it's already, probably gonna be doomy, but I'm looking forward to hearing why this is the Hotel of Doom. And is it going to be like an H.H. Holmes thing, or is it just riddled with problems because it's North Korea? I don't know. So let's find out.
This video is made possible by the Great Courses Plus, an on-demand video learning service. Learn at your own pace, with no tests and no schedules. Check out a free trial of the Great Courses Plus through the link in the description below. More about them a little later in today's video.
Okay.
It's been called the ugliest building in the world. Looming over the heart of Pyongyang, the Ryugyong Hotel looks like a cross between an ancient pyramid and a retro spaceship. Standing at 330 meters tall, this concrete behemoth dwarfs the surrounding apartment blocks. At the time it was built, the Ryugyong...
See, I think he said behemoth there, but it sounded like beer moth, and I'm just like... Now I'm thinking about beer moths.
Was intended to be the tallest hotel in the world, a 99-floor skyscraper that would project North Korean might to the very edges of the earth. But that never happened. Instead, work ground to a halt in 1992, leaving only a desolate skeleton. The nickname the Western press gave this unfinished eyesore, the Hotel of Doom. But what caused this grand project to go awry? What unknown calamity turned this socialist dream into so much abandoned concrete? Well, the answer to that question is even darker than you're probably expecting.
Oh, okay.
Today we are exploring the tallest unoccupied building in the entire world and uncovering the forgotten tragedy that turns this one-time hotel into a silent tomb.
Dang, okay.
Picture the scene. It's 1986. In America, nearly 7 million people are joining hands trying to make a chain across the country. In Europe, Chernobyl is spewing radiation like an atomic kettle. Meanwhile, in Pyongyang, Kim Il-sung is a supreme leader with a problem. A problem that has been haunting his nightmares for the best part of half a decade. The North Korean leader is terrified that his country is falling behind its southern neighbor. For younger viewers, this probably sounds a bit like duh moment. I mean, North Korea is an impoverished communist hellhole while South Korea is a modern capitalist society. But it wasn't always like this. Less than a decade earlier, in the mid-1970s, the two Koreas had been broadly comparable. Both were dictatorships. Both relied on foreign backers to survive.
Okay. I was like, what? But no, they were comparable. Okay, because I was like, I know for a fact there's like just so much of North Korea that like doesn't even have electricity. Like if you take a look at like images of at nighttime in North Korea, it's just these black holes. It's terrifying.
Had similar-sized economies. But then the 1980s had dawned, and North Korea's Kim Il-sung had watched in horror as South Korea strapped rocket boosters to its economy. In 1981, Seoul had even won the right to host the 1988 Summer Olympic Games. In 1986, South Korean builders working in Singapore had constructed the world's tallest hotel. Frankly, the achievements of the South were starting to make Kim's socialist utopia look a bit like Hicksville. Kim needed a plan, something he could do that would upstage the South and show the entire world that Pyongyang was where it was at. Ensconced in his hermit kingdom, the supreme leader at last.
Was it not as terrifyingly dangerous there at the time then? Because now it's it's difficult to get in to North Korea at all, and a bunch of journalists have just never come back out again. And I don't know, I feel like there's just the very limited information we get out of that country now tends to be just horrific. So was it also the same in 1986 and then in the 80s, or has it gotten worse over time?
Last hit upon an idea. Why not beat the South at their own game? That same year, 1986, Pyongyang announced two things sure to outdo even the Olympic Games and the world's tallest hotel. In 3 years, North Korea would hold its own Olympics, and all the participants would stay in a newly built hotel even bigger than the South Korean one. As plans go, this was practically up there with sabotaging your ex's wedding by holding your own, even bigger wedding just down the road. But, that's how things roll in a dictatorship. What were people really going to do? Tell Kim no? Grounds broke on the Ryugyong Hotel in 1987 with the aim of being finished in time for 1989. The plans were insane. The Ryugyong would stand 300 meters tall with 3,000 rooms and between 5 and 7 rotating restaurants. It was built to last too, forged purely from durable concrete. This is one explanation for why the hotel looks like a pyramid, and that's to make sure that all the weight of the concrete was distributed over a wide area.
Cool, because I was wait a minute, that tall, only concrete? That just sounds like a disaster waiting to happen straight off the bat, but okay. It's a pyramid so that it doesn't fall over the wind.
But there's another explanation too. By the mid-1980s, Kim was already preparing the way for his son, Kim Jong-il, and yes, there's going to be a lot of Kims popping up in today's video, to become the new leader. An integral part of the younger Kim's myth was that he was born on the storied Mount Paektu. What better way to remind the party faithful in Pyongyang than by building a giant mountain to watch over them? The same year work began, Kim decreed the Ryugyong would be a special zone, somewhere vices like gambling and capitalism would be allowed. This was part of Kim's plan to attract over $200 million in Western investment. He even envisaged Japanese tour groups staying in the hotel and never having to leave its vast premises. Little did Kim the Elder know, but none of his grand dreams would come to pass. In just 5 short years.
Here's a hotel where you can practice capitalism in secret. But not secret, it's allowed in the hotel, apparently. Only in the hotel.
Years, the Ryugyong would become not a symbol of North Korean success, but of its sudden decline. If you'd have taken a tour of Pyongyang in 1989, you might have thought you were visiting a boom city. As Kim's World Festival of Youth and Students approached, the regime was splurging money on refitting the capital. New roads were opening, a new stadium was being built, the airport was modernized. And above it all, looking serenely down on the millions of people below, was the half-finished outline of the world's tallest hotel. Yep. Half finished. In a sign of things to come, the hotel had missed the 1989 deadline. But that wasn't a problem. The government had just pushed the deadline back to 1992 and pretended that, that had been the plan all along. Once again, this was a dictatorship, and who's going to disagree? On July the 1st, 1989, the world descended on Pyongyang for the not Olympic Games. And we mean the world. Over 175 countries were represented, including the USA. If that sounds unlikely, so does everyone flocking to the 1936 Olympics in Nazi Germany. For the next week, Kim Il-sung smiled beautifully down on the 22,000 athletes competing in his capital. This was North Korea at its best, glistening in the summer sun, the pinnacle of communism. We can only hope Kim savored that shining moment. It's likely that that 1 week in July 1989 was the last time the sun ever shone on Pyongyang. So let's now fast forward 2 years to 1991. Already the triumphal vibe from that 1989 summer is gone, replaced by grey foreboding. On the horizon, the Ryugyong remains unfinished, work now proceeding at a crawl. The foreign investment Kim had predicted had never shown up. To make up for the shortfall, it ploughed as much as 2% of the country's GDP into the hotel every year. And this was a problem because the North's economy was already pretty close to collapse. Not 5 months after Kim's shining summer in 1989, the Berlin Wall had fallen with a crash that was felt across the world. Over the next 2 years, communism had collapsed in Europe, the USSR had dismantled itself, and the Kremlin's subsidies to Pyongyang had just dried up. Without those subsidies, the dream of the Ryugyong was doomed to die. In 1992, in the face of a flatlining economy, Kim finally pulled the plug on the world's tallest hotel. Work just stopped. Although it had reached its full height of 300 meters, the Ryugyong had never been covered. And now it wouldn't be. As the workers trooped out for the last time, they left behind a lifeless tomb, a dead hotel overlooking a financially broken city. The only sign of Kim's grand dream that remained was a rustling yellow crane abandoned at the very top of the Ryugyong pyramid.
Oh, that's kind of wonky. Oh, oof. That would unnerve me, I think. The fact that there's still a crane up there, I'd be like waiting for it to fall. Just waiting constantly. So when are they going to ask Elon Musk to start funding this? Because it sounds like the kind of thing he'd dig.
It would remain there for the next 16 years. In the uneasy atmosphere of 1992, no one in Pyongyang could have known it, but those 16 years would bring the country to its knees.
Dang.
In the following years, the Ryugyong would come to symbolize the catastrophe engulfing North Korea, a crisis brought on by hubris, mismanagement, and incompetence. A crisis known to the West as the North Korean famine. But before we get into the chilling part of today's story, we do need to back up a little and explain exactly how it happened. How the triumph of July 1989 could turn to the unspeakable horror of the mid-1990s. To do that, we need to go back to the very birth of North Korea. The Hermit Kingdom arose from the ashes of the Second World War. Annexed into Imperial Japan in 1910, the Korean peninsula was divided in World War II's endgame after joint invasions from the Soviets and the Americans. The Americans occupied the south while the Soviets occupied the north. When it came time for the occupation to end in 1948, both Koreas declared themselves independent. But neither was really a viable nation yet. Both relied on handouts from their patrons to keep afloat. In the north, this mainly took the form of food subsidies. When the Koreas had divided, the south had taken all of the good arable lands, while the north had been left with a load of rocky fields that you could grow probably about a single turnip in. But, this wasn't a problem as long as those USSR subsidies kept on rolling in. The only trouble was
Kim
the USSR wasn't totally sure they would. Not long after North Korea became...
it's not like communist Russia was doing a very good job of feeding its own people around that time.
A communist state, China had also gone communist. But instead of being nice, 2 more allies, Kim was more we're kind of screwed. The problem was that China and the USSR both wanted to be the leaders of the socialist world and for all other nations to imitate them. This was fine when Mao was basically a moustacheless Stalin tribute act, but after Stalin died and the USSR started steering in a new direction, it became a bit of an issue. You know how sometimes your friends will have a big bust-up and you somehow get caught in the middle and you don't want to take sides? Well, that was Kim in the 1950s, only instead of being unfriended by Khrushchev on Facebook, he might have vital food imports cut off. The only way to avoid a nasty shock in the future was for North Korea to become completely self-sufficient. Yeah. But how do you take a country as physically incapable of feeding itself as North Korea and make it self-supporting? Well, it's quite simple. You lie. In the mid-1950s, Kim unveiled a new guiding philosophy for his nation. Juche is hard to explain, as Kim kept changing the exact meaning whenever it suited him, but a core tenet was that of self-reliance, especially regarding food. Initially, it really was a piece of performance art, a way for Kim to demonstrate to his international backers that he really didn't need them. Come the 1980s, though, Kim decided to implement it for real. Peasants were sent out to chop down trees and farm every spare scrap of land. Unfortunately, this led to two catastrophic side effects. One, widespread soil erosion, which would harm harvests for years to come, and two, it convinced the elite that North Korea really could go it alone. Key to this last bit was the new fertilizer imports from the USSR. They produced massive harvests, so when Kim went out to tour the farms, he was pretty much all like, hey, we can totally feed ourselves, great! By the time we catch up with our main narrative...
But also, you're still getting that in from the USSR, so not great there. And it's like, ugh, oof. I love how the wealthy always forget that their wealth is like built on the backs of the people that are poor. Like, where would it, like, most of these people wouldn't be wealthy if they hadn't, you know, they need the poor people. Without the farmers, without the, like, factory workers building them their shit, like, where would they be? Where would they, without all their stuff? Also, it's supposed to be a communist nation. Why is there an elite? There shouldn't be.
In 1992, though, as work had just stopped on the Ryugyong Hotel, North Korea was in a very dangerous place. You had an economy nearly flattened building this stupid hotel, an agriculture sector that had overworked the land and was now in steep decline, and a ruling class utterly convinced that their nation could feed itself. When the USSR suddenly ceased to exist, taking its fertilizer subsidies with it, the last piece of a very destructive puzzle fell into place. Despite Kim's best-laid plans, his country was now heading towards one of the worst catastrophes in a century. And just before we get into that catastrophe, I do want to take a quick moment to tell you about today's sponsor, the Great Courses Plus. You can learn from the world's best professors on the Great Courses Plus, and if you're enjoying this video, I really think you'll enjoy their course called Utopia and Terror in the 20th Century, which would be a great expansion from today's video, not only looking at North Korea, but also at the Nazis, fascism, Pol Pot, and a lot of other dark periods of the 20th century, and also where we might be heading in the future. Basically, the Great Courses Plus is like a university education, but it's at your own pace with no tests and no schedules, and it's incredibly easy to access. You can do it on PC, tablet, phone. They've also got audio streaming, which is very convenient, so you can listen on the move. That's generally what I do. So it's great stuff, and you can try it for free. Get a free trial by going to thegreatcoursesplus.com/geographics or use the link in the description below. Doing that helps support this show, helps us making these videos. And let's get back to it. It was July the 8th, 1994, exactly 5 years to the day since North Korea's Great Summer ended, when Kim Il-sung finally died. As he went off to the great mountain in the sky, we can only hope that his soul caught one last glimpse of the unfinished Ryugyong Hotel.
As sort of like a
that he felt a pang of sadness. If he did...
I love that that's so petty. As his soul floated up to the great beyond, we could only hope that he saw his last gigantic failure and just absolutely lost it. Oh my. Yeah, let's hope.
It would have been just the first time in the coming decades that the sight of the hotel moved someone to tears. At the time Kim died, the storm clouds were gathering around North Korea, but the deluge hadn't yet started. It would fall instead on his son. Kim Jong-il didn't officially take over the nation until years after his father's death, but unofficially he held all the power and all the responsibility for around 25 million lives. And this was a problem because Kim...
And it's a problem because he doesn't give a fuck about any of those 25 million lives. Like, he didn't care about... Ugh, I feel so bad for the people of North Korea.
Younger was even less responsible than Butthead. While Kim Il-sung was at least a veteran who'd fought the Japanese occupiers in World War II, Kim Jong-il was as spoiled, as pampered, and as utterly sadistic as a Roman emperor. He couldn't manage the economy. He couldn't even mismanage it like his father, because that would have at least required some basic grasp of how the economy worked in order for him to screw it up. This was the guy at the top just as Kim Il-sung's chickens came home to roost. Just as soil erosion, lost fertilizers, the finances broken by building the Ryugyong, and an obsession with self-reliance, they all collided to create one of history's most devastating famines. By summer 1994, there were food shortages across the nation. In response, the regime coined the cheery slogan, "Let's only eat 2 meals a day." Don't let the word "let's" fool you into thinking there was some choice here, though. The government had complete control of food distribution. If they wanted you to only eat 2 meals a day, well, that's all you were going to eat. Yet even this didn't slow down the growing crisis. At first, Kim the Younger tried to make lemonade from the desiccated lemon husks that life had handed him. He allowed food to be rationed on a loyalty basis. Those who unquestionably followed the regime got just enough to live on, and those suspected of disloyalty, well, they starved to death.
Dang.
But soon, there wouldn't even be enough food for this. In 1995, catastrophic flooding ruins what few crops were left. Panicked, the regime accused the nation's farmers of hoarding crops and reduced their food rations. And with that began a deadly cycle of incompetence. Faced with lower rations for the false charge of hoarding food, North Korea's farmers started hoarding it for real. This
Yeah,
led to
I bet they
farmers
would have had
being
to.
executed, even though there was no one to take their place. Those
Well, it's like we don't. Oh my god! Wow. All right. So again, this is where people don't remember. It's like you need the freaking farmers to freaking live, and now you're just killing farmers because of wow. If anyone should be hoarding food, it should be the farmers, because they're the ones who got to work the land, like to make you more.
who survived were simply able to bribe the soldiers with some of that hoarded grain. Either way, the mega crops stayed out of the hands of the general population.
Great.
By the end of 1996, the state had effectively collapsed. There was widespread starvation and population flight as citizens just ran for the safety of China. In Pyongyang, a city only party loyalists were allowed to live in, people suffered malnutrition so extreme that the skin began to flake from their faces. Throughout the entire famine, only the military was able to have anything approaching a normal diet, a necessary precaution to stop them rebelling. But there was one exception to all
Yeah,
of this
I guess you don't want your only people with guns to rebel against you.
misery. During the height of the famine, Kim Jong-il was having chefs flown in from 5-star hotels across the world to prepare him the rarest delicacies. As the dictator filled his belly, a holocaust was unfolding in the villages. Buckle up, because the next section's going to be grim.
Well, it's Kim Jong-il, so, yeah.
During the height of the famine, children fled starving villages for cities. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of malnourished kids flooded into cities like Chongqing. There, they were forced to sleep out in the open, on streets, in train stations, in parks, anywhere there was room. Before long, these kids started vanishing, snatched off the street in the dead of night. While most had simply died of hunger or exposure, a small number may have met a much worse fate. According to rumors at the time, children were being abducted by starving people in order to be eaten. We have no way of knowing if this story is true. North Korea is so closed off that it's impossible to verify anything that happened in these grim years. All we have are just whispers from defectors. But the mere fact that this story exists shows just how bad things got in the 1990s. The government named the period of famine the Arduous March, after a military action.
Especially if it was defectors telling that story and not just people out of the country making it up whole cloth. Like, even if it wasn't true, even if it's not true, like, the people who left, sounds like at least some of them definitely believed it, which means that it was bad enough that they it's like, I think someone might have did it. That's awful.
Kim Il-sung took against the Japanese in the depths of winter, forcing his soldiers to march on despite the cold. But at least those men had been marching towards a goal. There was a dignity in their suffering. In the arduous march of the 1990s, those who clung to their dignity simply didn't survive. There are tales, some backed up by eyewitness statements, of families banishing their elder relatives to die so that the children might survive. There are tales, too, of peasants reduced to eating grass, of the frog population nearly going extinct as people turned to eating them. It's said that infant mortality skyrocketed, that an entire generation of children grew up with the physical and mental defects brought on by extreme malnutrition. Overall, it's impossible to say what the cost of the arduous march was. The North Korean government contends 240,000 died, but the most common estimate is between 2.5
that's gotta be
and
more.
3.5 million people. That's equivalent to 10% of the entire population. On a per capita basis, even Mao's Great Leap Forward was less horrific.
A true
that was Mao's
decimation.
Great Leap Forward. This is why we refer to the Ryugyong as a tomb all the way back in the opening section of this video. It may not have been the only factor, but Kim Il-sung's vanity project had helped devastate the economy, putting the North on the path to famine. Now, still in its broken, unfinished state, the hotel had become a vast monument to all of those dying in the countryside, a reminder of the nameless North Koreans sacrificed on the altar of Kim's vanity. Finally, in 1996, Pyongyang dropped Juche's agricultural element and begged the international community for food aid. At first, the Western nations dithered, then they agreed, but funneled the aid through Pyongyang, where black marketeers swiped it all and resold it at inflated prices. When the aid agencies came to North Korea in person, the regime cleared all the dead and dying out of Pyongyang. And that's what the West saw. A city that was hungry, but not in the grips of something comparable to Ukraine's Holodomor. But the Holodomor this was. Out in the countryside, entire villages had just faded away. The arduous march came to an end in 1998. By that time, an entire generation had been traumatized. In a better world, the Ryugyong would have been left unfinished to mark what had just happened, a monument to those vanished lives. But North Korea is like a backwards elephant in that respect. It excels at forgetting. It excels at covering up. And it wouldn't be long.
So how did it end? Like, as if all of the aid people, they only saw, like, okay, it looks like it's maybe getting better, you know, and like they didn't give it to the people who give the food to the people who needed it most. Like, how did this get better? Like, just magically was fixed one day? Like, it seems like the aid people were useless.
Before the Ryugyong was covered up in a very literal sense. In 2008, Egypt's Rascom conglomerate made a surprise announcement. They would be building North Korea's first 3G network. As part of their contract, they had agreed to simultaneously finish the Ryugyong's exterior. Let's just say this raised more than a few eyebrows. By 2008, North Korea had become an international pariah. It had tested its first atomic bomb and been branded part of the axis of evil by then-President George W. Bush. And now, here it was, suddenly determined to finish a hotel that no one would ever stay in. That same year, Rascom removed the rusting crane from the hotel's roof, bringing to an end a 16-year construction hiatus. Over the next 3 years, they slowly covered the exposed concrete shell in glass, turning what had been a tomb into a sleek skyscraper. Even before they finished, the regime was already embracing the change. On May 1st, 2009, a spectacular fireworks display was launched from the hotel, lighting up the night sky. From airbrushing the hotel out of official photos only a few years before, the regime seemed to be actively embracing it, almost like finishing the hotel could erase the hungry ghosts of the 1990s from history. Not long after Rascom finished the hotel's exterior, Kim Jong-il finally passed away and power transferred to Kim Jong-un. Just like his father, and like his grandfather before him, the newest Kim got right on with working on the hotel.
Yeah, he still looks like a thumb, that guy.
Originally, the plan was to sell it to a luxury hotel company. In 2013, German group Kempinski even declared that they would take over the Ryugyong, but that deal quickly fell through. Around the same time, pictures emerged of the inside of the structure. It was as bare and as empty as it had ever been. While the exterior was now done, it looked like nothing was ever going to happen on the inside. And that's how things stayed. As the third Kim got into his groove, detonating nukes and oppressing his people, the Ryugyong continued to sit empty, its exterior gleaming, its interior empty and dead, a handy metaphor for the regime that it was commissioned by.
Yeah, a
but
little
it appears that the story of the Ryugyong is not yet over. In 2018, LED lights were added to the hotel, allowing it to light up and display waving flags and propaganda to the entire city. At first, the light show was only turned on for special occasions. By 2019, though, it was lit up most evenings from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. This is in a city where electricity is often carefully rationed. Could this be a sign that the regime has plans for the hotel? With North Korea, who could possibly say? Today, the Ryugyong occupies a strange place, both gleaming and unfinished, useful and utterly useless. It may be that this latest Kim has some grand plan for it. It may be that those international investors may finally arrive. But, don't count on it.
No,
North
I
Korea
wouldn't.
is a state that has consistently defied outside observations, consistently failed to behave like other nations. Where it should have collapsed, it tottered on. Where its people
just continually just doing all the human rights violations it could get its grubby little hands on.
have overthrown their leader, they've instead remained cowed by him, even as it cost them their lives.
What could they fucking do?
In such a nation,
What could they do? Like, I feel like that feels a little victim blamey, a little bit. Like, what are they gonna do? Half of them don't have electricity. Like, they tiny little, like, oh my god, like, what are they supposed to do? They do not have weapons. They don't have access to the outside world. They can't ask anyone for help. Like, they're so boned.
Prediction we could possibly make about the hotel's fate would just be bound to be proven wrong. Like Ceausescu's palace in Romania, the Ryugyong Hotel is a luxurious symbol of deprivation, a grand monument to a single man's ego, built even as his nation starved. Unlike in North Korea, though, Romanians snapped. In December 1989, they overthrew Ceausescu's communist government and shot the dictator and his wife against a wall. Today, the palace of the parliament is used by the civilian government. No longer just a symbol of oppression, but a modern state that has cast off the long shadow of communism. North Korea may still be the hermit kingdom. The Ryugyong may still be an empty shell marking the deaths of millions. But things won't necessarily stay that way. It could be that the final chapter of the Ryugyong story has yet to be written. A chapter where it comes to symbolize something more powerful than darkness and despair. A chapter where it might come to symbolize hope. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up below and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Right now we're doing new videos twice a week. So subscribe, hit the notification bell. Also, if you'd like to support us, please do support our great sponsor, The Great Courses Plus, who I'm linking to below. And thank you for watching.
Okay. Well, that was distressing as I thought it might be. Yeah, I don't know. I cannot blame, if anybody who does rise up, like, if you do it in like a big group like that, great. Glad you were able to. But, like, I don't know. I cannot blame the North Korean populace for not being able to do it. Like, I can't. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope we all learned something, and let me know if there's more stuff that you'd like me to look at, similar to that. So thanks again. I'll see you in the next one.